Here we are going to see how is the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. More specifically, we are going to start with the draw of the aggregate demand. So we are going to be able to see how is the relation between the prices of one economy and the aggregate demand of that economy. Okay? So we are going to move along the aggregate demand, but also we are going to see what element can be behind of a shift of the aggregate demand. Okay, so given any possible price, what is going to make that the aggregate demand, the level of the aggregate demand is higher or lower. Okay, we are going to do that in a really simple way, just observing what element how the price can change the aggregate demand. But then we are going to see that that can be inside of the aggregate of the model of ISLM model. Okay, so though it is really simple and easy enough, the analysis of the aggregate demand by its own without the ISLM curve, we are going to see that we can embody this aggregate demand curve inside of the ISLM model, okay, to make things like more complex. Also, we are going to talk about the short-run aggregate supply. So far, we've been talking about the aggregate demand without prices. That was the first ISLM model that we saw. In that case, the thing that we were observing is how the output of one economy and the interest rate of one economy was determined by shock of the demand, like the public spending, transfer, taxes, or any decision of of consumers or companies, right? But in that case, prices was fixed. So for any possible price, for a given price, the aggregate demand could change and the output adapted to that aggregate demand. So aggregate demand, it was equal to the output of the economy for a price. Now we are going to introduce the effect of price, because in the short run, the thing that we are really observing is that prices can change, okay? So that's why we are going to introduce for the first time the aggregate supply. In fact, it's going to be the short run aggregate supply. We are going to see how's the relation of the short run aggregate supply with respect to the prices. Okay, we are going to see that that relationship is positive. Higher prices is higher supply, as one should expect. And also we are going to see which elements are going to be the ones that are going to shift or can shift this aggregate supply curve. Also, we are going to talk about the long run aggregate supply. And we are going to see that the process in which the short run aggregate supply tends to go to the long run aggregate supply is the medium run. Okay. Now we are going to see that there are three possible ways in which the prices are going to affect the aggregate demand, but always in each of them the relationship is going to be negative. So higher prices, lower aggregate demand. Okay, so you can use the three of them or just with one is enough. Okay, here we are going to start with the wealth effect. So just here I have to remind you what is behind of the aggregate demand. Remember that I usually talk about aggregate demand, but also the sandbox you can see like C is like the aggregate demand of an hypothetical good, which is C. Okay, so the aggregate demand of one economy is all the consumption coming from the different economic agents that are in that economy. So we are talking about consumers, in that case is consumption. Also we are talking about firms, in that case is investment, the government, public spending, and the rest of the world, okay, if we are open to the rest of the world. So export minus import. Here we are going to focus in this element, which is consumption, as I said. Just remember that consumption has like two components. One is going to be fixed, more or less, it's done, so exogenous, which is autonomous consumptions. But also we have the other element that depend on the disposable income, where disposable income is income minus taxes plus transfer. Okay, so as higher is your income, your disposable income is higher, as higher are the transfer that you are receiving from the government, and it's going to decrease with the taxes that you are paying. Okay, So far we said that the autonomous consumption was done, it was exogenous, but now we're going to see in a deeper detail what is inside of that component. In fact, we know that one of the components that is going to be inside of the autonomous consumption is the wealth. So it's like the money that the people have, but it's not saving, it's the accumulation of the saving, okay? Just remember, it's not the same, the stock variable, than the flow variable. Here we are talking about the stock variable, so the wealth, the total money that you have. Other element, though is not here, that is behind of consumption is the expectation of consumers. So sometimes we are going to talk about that, and that is going to generate a change in the aggregate demand. But well, going back to prices, here the need that we need to consider is how the autonomous consumption is related with the wealth of the families, of the households, but not just the nominal wealth that we use this W. Be careful, it's not the same as weights, okay, though we use the same letter, but here we are talking about wealth. It's not just the nominal wealth, it's the real wealth. So that means we need to divide the wealth by the prices. And that is going to make a change in our decision about the autonomous consumption. In fact, as higher is the price, it's like I'm less richer, just the opposite. It's like my wealth, my real wealth is decreasing. So that means I'm going to consume less. So higher prices is like feeling I'm more, like say, I'm poorer than before, so less rich than before. So I'm going to consume less. My aggregate demand is going to decrease. Let's talk about the whole economy. So the aggregate demand is going to decrease, and then the output, because output is going to adapt to the aggregate demand. So lower demand, lower output, and this is going to mean lower disposable income. So because if the production is smaller, that means you need to have less workers. So there are going to be people that is going to lose their job. So the disposable income in many households, or some of them, is going to decrease, okay? So that's going to mean a lower consumption, because if you remember, consumption is related with the disposable income, which is this, okay? Disposable income, as I said, income minus taxes plus transfer. Also, you need to bear in mind that investment can be formulated in a much more realistic way than an exogenous number. Instead of that, we are going to see how investment is related with the output of the economy. As higher is the output of the economy, higher is going to be the investment, because the output is like the level of sales. So if you see that the level of sales is high, that means opportunity. So that's why the investment is going to be higher than in a case in which the economy is suffering a recession, right? About the interest rate, we are going to see that that relationship is negative. Higher interest rate means lower investment, okay? So just bear that in mind. In this case, the thing that we are observing is a lower output. So that's going to mean a lower investment. So given the fact that consumption and investment is decreasing, we are going to see a second decrease in the aggregate demand, which is going to mean a second decrease in the output. And this is going to continue one more time and one more time. You know that that effect is going to start to smelt, melting, sorry. So it's going to be smaller and smaller. But the final result is given an increase of prices, the aggregate demand is going to decrease even more than this first direct effect because of the multiplier effect. But eventually, doesn't matter so far how it's going to be that value. The thing is the aggregate demand, so the output of the economy is going to decrease. So if we started in this point, that price, and we have hypothetically this value of output, the fact of increasing the price is going to mean a lower output, right? So this is going to be smaller than the other one. If we observe just the opposite, lower price, the effect is going to go just to the opposite direction. So lower prices means higher consumption. More consumption is more aggregate demand. More aggregate demand is more output. More output means higher investment, higher disposable income. So higher consumption, the aggregate demand is going to increase again, and then the production again, and then the aggregate demand again, because more production is more disposable output, more disposable income, and so on, right? You see that the price decrease, the aggregate demand increase. So now I'm going to stop here to emphasize something that is really important. So the thing that we are observing here is how we are moving along the curve. So always that the aggregate demand changes because the prices are changing, you are moving along the curve. And this curve is not shifting, okay? So that is really important. Be aware that always that the prices are the ones that are generating a new level of output, a new level of aggregate demand. That means you are moving along the curve. Now we are going to see how the interest rate also can be generate that negative relation between prices and the aggregate demand. But before that, before starting with the whole process, let's go back to the money market and remember where is behind the money market, okay? So the money market, here we have the interest rate, can be the nominal, like in this case, or the real with the lowercase r. In any case, it's right, okay? Also here we have, let me show you the supply, but as you can see, it's the real supply of money. Just to remind you, just recall that the money supply, behind that is the central bank decision, okay? So we have the central bank, but also the private banks, okay? Both of them are going to configure the final supply of money. And here we have that in terms of, in real terms, so divided by P, okay? So that means it's not just money, but because P is like the price of an hypothetical consumption, a basket mean like the number of baskets that the whole economy can buy given the money and the prices, okay? Also here we have the demand of money. Just remember that the demand of money or demand of liquidity, that's why we use the L, is the amount of money that people or other economic agents like the private banks want to keep with them. In terms of people, is like the money that I want to have in my pocket, okay, or wallet, but also is the money that I decided to have as a deposit, which is really easy to get back the money with me, okay? That's why it's also like liquid money. And the relationship of that liquidity demand with the interest rate is going to be negative. So you can see that. So as higher is the interest rate, lower is the quantity of money that I demand to have with me. As lower is the interest rate, higher is the amount of money that I want to have with me. And how is that? Why is that? If you remember, the cost of having money with me is the interest rate that I don't reside in. So if instead of having the money with me, I invest buying bond, I'm going to get the interest rate. So I'm losing in a certain way money just having that money with me. And that is the interest rate cost. That is the opportunity cost of having money with me. So that's why, as higher is the interest rate, there's going to be less people that decided to have the money with them, or at least they are going to decide to have less money. That's why high interest rate is associated with a small liquidity demand, okay? And we are going to observe the opposite. As lower is the interest rate, is like, so I'm not getting anything having those bonds. I prefer to have the money with me, okay? That is the main idea. Also, we know that the relationship between the demand of money with the output of the economy is positive. So as higher is the output, higher is going to be the demand of money, because that means I'm going to find many opportunities to buy things, sell things, make an investment. So if the economy is going well, I want to have the money with me. I need that money to see if I can get a new opportunity, use that money in any new projects or whatever, okay? And the opposite is going to happen when it's going to happen when the income is really low, right? That means less opportunities. So I'm not so, I don't really need the money with me because I'm not going to buy so much. I'm not going to make any kind of investment, right? So to see the effect of, just remember, to see the effect of positive shock in the output of the economy, in terms of the demand of liquidity, we should expect a shape of this curve to the right side. How is that? Because it's given any interest rate, here we have interest rate, we don't have income. So any interest rate, because the income is higher, because the GDP is higher, I should expect that this economy is going to demand more money. So we should have a right shift of this curve, and the opposite is going to happen with a recession, things like that. Okay. Also remember that here, when the supply of money meets the demand of money, we are going to have the interest rates. And now let's go back to the interest rate effect. Okay, just remember that the main goal of this is observing how the prices are going to change the aggregate demand. More specifically, higher prices, lower aggregate demand. And let's see this. So if prices are higher, take a look at this. We have prices here. So the money supply the real money supply depends on prices. As higher is P, this real supply of money is going to be smaller, right? And that is going to mean a higher interest rate. So lower real money, means high interest rate. So that means lower investment, because investment, it was related with the interest rate in a negative way. Higher is the level of the interest rate, that means more costly the investment that I'm doing. So that's why that relationship is negative. And less investment means a lower aggregate demand, since it's one of the components of the aggregate demand. Lower aggregate demand means that people, it's not buying, so the output is going to decrease. I don't want to produce, as producer, things that no one is buying. So less aggregate demand means lower output. And here we have like two effects or two channels. Lower output means less people working, so that means lower disposable income. And finally means lower consumption, but also lower output means that investment is going to decrease. As we observed previously, investment is also related with the level of output. And if the economy is decreasing, the investment is not going to increase. Instead, it's going to decrease as well. So eventually, this increase in prices by this investment is going to mean lower aggregate demand, lower output, and once again it's going to mean lower aggregate demand, lower output, and so on, because also we are going to observe the multiplier effect. Just remember that this effect through consumption and investment in the second role, I don't know how to say, second term, it's going to be smaller than the first one, okay? So this reduction of investment is higher than this one. And here the decrease of consumption is smaller than decrease of disposable income. And this because part of the disposable income is for consumption, but also the other part is for saving. So that's why the effect is not going to be so direct. Just remember that consumption, disposable income, which is this one, is multiplied by a number which is smaller than 1. So that means that any change of this is going to generate a change of consumption, but it's not a 1-to-1 effect, okay? It's smaller than that. But eventually, the increase of prices means a lower output, so something like this. And the opposite is going to happen when instead of increasing prices, we decrease prices. We observe, a decrease in prices. That is going to mean a higher money supply, real money supply, so lower interest rate, higher investment, higher aggregate demand, higher production. More production means more workers, so higher disposable income, and more consumption, but also at the same time, higher output means higher investment. So the aggregate demand is going to increase again. The output is going to follow the aggregate demand, and more output again means more disposable income, and also more investment, more aggregate demand. Though those effects, the second one, are going to get in smaller and smaller, but they are positive. So lower price means higher aggregate demand. So the thing that we are observing once again is how we are moving along that curve. So always that the price is changes and means unchanged in the aggregate demand means that we are moving along this curve, okay? And this was the interest rate effect. And now we are going to see the competitive effect. So that's why now I want you to focus in these last elements of the aggregate demand. In fact, we are talking about net export. What is the same as export minus import? So, but to understand how prices are going to affect the aggregate demand through the international trade, because now we are going to assume that this economy is open, otherwise we don't have export and import. But to understand that, we need to understand first what is behind export and import. And here you have, okay? So when we are talking about export, we know that the volume of export is related or depends on the nominal exchange rate, the prices of the economy, and the prices in the rest of the world, okay? We use the star when we are talking about the rest of the world, I mean other economies. In fact, you can think about just two economies, the domestic one and the foreign economy, okay? So the star is for the foreign economy. Also should that be careful, depending on the book that you are taking, you can see that the nominal exchange rate can be with the lowercase l or the capital letter, E, and the capital letter E. So, but it's the same, okay? In fact, here, the nominal exchange rate is the value of our currency, okay? The value of our currency. So, if we are talking about euros, that means that the value of €1, it can be measured in euros. Instead of that, we need dollars, okay? So it's like the number of dollars that pay €1, okay? So as higher as that is because our currency is more expensive, so it's stronger. A low value of the nominal exchange rate means that our currency is cheap or is weak, okay? And now let's see how's the relationship of each variable with the export. Take a look at this. This is negative. So the meaning of that is as lower is our nominal exchange rate, so the value of our currency, we are going to export more, right? Negative relationship. And vice versa. If our currency is strong, so a high value of nominal exchange rate means a lower level of export. Of course, because my currency is really expensive, that means I'm going to sell less, right? And these prices, the relationship is the same as in the case of nominal exchange rate. It's negative, because that is not the value of my currency, but it's the value of the cost of my goods. So as higher is the price of my goods, by sure I'm going to export less, okay? So while here we are talking about the cost of my currency, here I'm talking about the cost of my goods, okay? And finally, the prices in the rest of the world, which is positive, of course, because that means if the foreign economies has really high prices, I'm going to sell more. I'm now more competitive. So that's why higher foreign prices means higher export. Now let's see what's going on with the imports. We are going to see the same variables, but the effect is going to be just the opposite, of course. So there isn't anything that is good in both cases, right? So if my currency is strong, that means I'm going to export less, but it means I'm going to import more, because a strong, so now the relationship between the value of my currency, so the nominal exchange rate, and my imports, just keep in mind that importing is buying from abroad, while exporting is selling abroad, okay? So as high as my currency, the value of my currency, that means that my euro now is able to buy more dollars than before. So I'm going to buy more in the United States, just because my currency is strong. So the relationship between nominal exchange rate and import is positive. What about my prices? If I'm suffering high prices, I'm going to buy abroad, so I'm going to import more. And vice versa with the foreign prices. If I am observing that the prices abroad are really high, I'm going to buy less from those economies. So my imports are going to decrease. So in that case, the relationship is going to be negative. Okay? So what is positive for export is going to be negative for import. That's the main conclusion. Also, you can, because though we don't need to talk about the real exchange rate, but I like to introduce all the terms that I can anytime that I have that opportunity. You can see how these three elements are here also. And this is the definition of the real exchange rate, not the nominal, the real. What is that? Real exchange rate is much better than the nominal exchange rate. Nominal exchange rate is just considering the value of one currency against other currency. But for real one is considering also the prices. You see? The prices. So when I'm making a decision, I'm considering the real exchange rates. Because I'm not just looking at the value of my currency. I also look how are the prices here and what are the prices in the foreign economy and make the comparison now with the prices and the value of my currency. In fact, the definition of that real exchange rate is in this way. You can see like these two elements are has a positive relation with this one. So that means if this increase is going to have the same effect as if this increase. So higher nominal exchange rate is the same as higher prices inside of my economy, while the foreign prices is divided, so the relationship is going to be just the opposite. Take a look at this, it's the same. Here you can see how nominal exchange rates and domestic prices has a negative effect, while the other is just the opposite, positive. And here is like these two elements has a positive effect and negative the other. So in fact, it's the thing that we're observing here. This and this has always the same effect, and this is just inverse. Let's take a look at closer to what is this. So the thing that we are having here is nominal exchange rate, so the value of my currency. And this means as higher is the value of my currency, I'm going to suffer, given the other elements constant, I'm going to suffer an appreciation, a real appreciation. Of course, one of these elements is the value of my currency. So if the value of my currency is higher, I'm going to be less competitive, right? Also, here we have prices. So that's in the domestic economy. So about my goods, higher is my prices, I'm going to suffer a real appreciation. So that means I'm more expensive than before. And let's take a look at the other element. And here the thing we have is foreign prices. So as higher is the foreign prices, lower is going to be the real interest rate. And in the exchange rate, lower. So that means I'm going to be more competitive. So in conclusion, as higher is the value of this, the real exchange rate, that is the value of my goods. So as higher is the real exchange rate, I'm going to be less competitive. So I'm going to export less, but I'm going to buy more. And as lower is this, that means I'm getting a real depreciation. So that means I'm going to sell more because now it's cheaper, but I'm going to buy less. Okay? In fact, you can think about it in terms of numbers, taking as reference number 1. So if this is 1, that means that let's take a car. Price of the car in Spain, the price of the car in United States, and here we have the value of my currency. So this is in euros. Here I have number of dollars per euro. So I'm going to compare my good in dollars divided by the other good, which is already in dollar. If this is equal to this, That means I don't care buying the car here or in United States. But if this is higher than 1, for example 2, that means given the cost of buying the car here and the cost of buying the car in United States, I'm able to buy 2 cars in United States because my price double the one in United States once I convert my price in dollars. So I can compare both prices. And if this is smaller than 1, for instance, 0.5, that means that the price in United States doubled the price in Europe. Or what is the same? My price is half of the price of United States because this is 0.5, it's just half, okay? Well, that was just a note. Now let's go back to prices. In general, and take a look at this graph that I make. In general, we can conclude that given the prices of the foreign economy, so that is constant, and given the nominal exchange rate, so that is constant, always that I increase my prices, I should expect, if this is net export, and here we have the relationship between prices and net export, always that I increase the prices, I should expect a decrease in my net export. So, and it makes sense. An increase of prices means that now I'm more expensive than before. So I'm going to export less. But in a relative way, I'm going to see that like the foreign prices are cheaper because my prices are really high. So I'm going to buy more. So less export, but higher import, for sure the net export is going to decrease. And vice versa, okay? Always that my prices decrease, I'm going to be more competitive. So my net export are going to be higher. Because being more competitive means that the other economies are less competitive. Okay, so I'm going to sell more and I'm going to buy less from abroad. Okay, so now let's go back to the competitive effects. So higher prices means lower net export, and that is one of the elements of the aggregate demand. So lower net export means lower aggregate demand. So this decrease, I'm sorry, I didn't put that, decrease, and also if the demand is smaller, the output is going to decrease. That's going to mean lower disposable income, so lower consumption, eventually, lower investment. And these are two elements of the aggregate demand. If this decreases, the aggregate demand is going to decrease. Less aggregate demand means less production. And I don't want to produce if people is not demanding. So less production, once again, means less workers. So the unemployment increase, the disposable income decrease, and also mean less investment and so on. Just remember that those second effect and third effects are going to be smaller, 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 but they are still significant until a point in which the marginal increase is zero. So eventually, higher price, given the competitiveness effect, so less competitive in this case, means lower output. And you're going to see just the opposite if you reduce the prices. Lower prices, you are more competitive, you are going to export more, buy less, higher net export that are going to have a positive effect in the aggregate demand, in the production, and so on. So at the end, mean higher output. Okay, so that was the positive effect. You can take any of the three, or the three of them, but with one is enough, okay? Just considering one is enough. In fact, normally people use the previous one, interest rate effect.